Alright, so after I finished my Bob Chipman video, I was thinking, I made this video, but I didn't really actually explain why I disagree with Bob on almost everything. So this video is going to be sort of supplementary to that. Don't expect any flashy colors. This is of course not going to be very well edited, not pre-planned. This is just me thinking, trying to maybe get my thoughts together on this, and you can sort of go on this journey with me. Because I feel like just telling everyone what Bob Chipman I think thinks is, well, there's something missing here. I should probably explain why all of his ideas are fundamentally flawed. Now, I don't really like doing these sorts of things. As I've explained in another video, I don't really like the whole skeptic community because there's no real intellectual prowess involved here, because you're effectively arguing with retards. The ideas that are being debunked, quote unquote, don't really necessitate debunking. You're not really fighting here with mental giants. You're fighting with idiots whose ideas are that farting on a woman on a subway train is a form of rape and you should go to jail. So anyone who thinks that he's some sort of intellectual for doing that is dead wrong. So I don't really like doing those sorts of videos, but I've already made like over an hour of me autistically going through his videos, through his tweets. I think I should finish where I started. Well, I should probably actually make more videos because I didn't even get to the creepy non-political stuff, but that's beside the point. So here are some of Bob's ideas and why they're fundamentally flawed, okay? So the underlying basis of everything he believes in is set on the idea that conservatives and white people, I guess also, I suppose he thinks all white people are conservative, are all intellectually inferior. Now, beyond the fact that this is of course not scientifically proven in any way, you can find some studies that sort of gerrymander the data. That they want to reach a conclusion that one group is smarter than the other group, that conservatives are dumb, or that Democrats are dumb. So they make a study and then they find one minor facet of IQ where one group is marginally better than the other, and they're like, gotcha. Conservatives, they're all retarded. So you can find a few of those studies, but of course it's bad methodology, and if you actually read it from some sort of newsline clipping that sort of summarizes the entire article in just a headline, then you won't get to the bottom of it. If you look at the actual study, you'll always find that the eventual results are that, let's say, Democrats are 0.1% less good at remembering things or at visualizing spatially, stuff like that. So the idea that conservatives are inherently less intelligent is very, very mistaken. And beyond that, there's of course the question of where he gets this idea, which is, well, it's a childish way of thinking. When you grow up a nerd, which is what Movie Bob probably grew up as, and he grew up in not a bad neighborhood, but he grew up in Brooklyn, and in a shitty part of Brooklyn, not the black part of Brooklyn, but he grew up in the poor Irish and poor Italian part of Brooklyn, so it's a shitty area. So he probably got beat up a lot in school, and it's like, you know what, these guys are stupid, I'm smart. See, you watch a lot of TV, and on TV the nerd that's getting beat up is always smart, the bullies are always dumb, so of course anyone who disagrees with me is stupid, and of course in these shows the bully is also always a bigot who hates gay people and who hates black kids and who hates anyone who's different than him. So of course all bullies are stupid and racist, and since of course you hear a lot in the news that Democrats sort of push this propaganda that conservatives are all racist, then conservatives and racists and bullies, all of them are the same thing, all of them are stupid, and by comparison, I'm a fucking genius. That's the thought process of Movie Bob. So it's all based on this defense mechanism that he built up to try and emotionally protect himself while in high school and in middle school, and sort of never really grew out of it. So his idea here, after he reaches this erroneous conclusion, is that he'll get rid of all of the unintelligent people with IQ tests, well, not necessarily IQ tests, I'll get to that in a second, but tests to see if they're allowed to vote, if they're smart enough. The idea of whether or not the more intelligent people should be the only ones allowed to vote, that's a complicated discussion. Some people might say yes, some people might say no. I generally err on the side of no, because even the most intelligent people in our society are not that smart. They're still hindered by their own moronic biases. I mean, Neil deGrasse Tyson, I showed a picture of him in the video as an individual who is both physically fit and smart, but Neil deGrasse Tyson got caught lying and making up quotes like multiple times to defend atheism. Now, I don't think atheism does not need defending, or more correctly, I would defend atheism, but not by lying. And if you see one of the supposed smartest people in the world, and he's probably not one of the smartest people in the world, but he's certainly smart enough to become a sort of pop scientist, a celebrity scientist. When you see one of these people sort of use lies and a bunch of nonsense to sort of defend their ideas, or for example, Bill Nye a few weeks ago started making up a bunch of bullshit about sex. He accidentally said that sex is a spectrum, which of course isn't true. So then instead of correcting himself, he had Netflix remove a segment from 20 years ago where he admits the sex is completely binary, and then he made a follow-up to that by trying to paint genetic defects as extra genders, and sort of lying by omission, just straight up science denialism. So if these sorts of people are prone to this sort of behavior, then the rest of us are lost. You can gather up the smartest people on earth and tell them you're the only ones who are allowed to vote, but that's not going to lead you to any utopia. And of course, even if you did that, Bob would not be amongst them. Even assuming that Bob has a moderately above average IQ, which I'm not even sure is true, well, he got beat up a lot in school. I don't know, maybe there's some correlation to this. Maybe there's some correlation to bad social skills and IQ. I have no idea. You see this a lot, but I don't know what this is based on. But assuming that even if Bob is somehow smart, he's certainly not hyper intelligent, and he would not be in this group that decides what happens to the world, or the entire group will be just people whose IQ is marginally above average. So that's not really a utopian worldview. That's not, get the people who are just above retarded and let them decide what we do. It's not going to fix anything. But anyways, the point is, Bob's idea here is that you disallow people who are unintelligent from voting, and he of course thinks that the conservatives will be the ones who will be blocked from this, because of course they will, because conservatives are stupid, the right wing is dumb, according to him. And so this is of course the plan. But this is of course not going to work, and beyond that, he also says that there's a lot of superstition about race, and of course he's talking about the bell curve, the studies that say that different races have different IQ levels, and that black people have lower IQ levels. Now, this is probably true. I mean, not to the degree that people who push this information around believe. I mean, the study that gets thrown out a lot and shown to people and there are attempts to discredit it is a very old study. There has been more research on this topic, as much as people try to avoid doing more research on this topic to avoid giving it any validity, but due to some external circumstances you can sort of affect these scores. Some of this is environmental. If, for example, you test IQ in a group that is entirely black, then the IQ scores are higher, because when you put a black kid in a white group and have him do an IQ test, then he feels sort of uncomfortable, insecure, and he ends up getting a lower score because their belief about themselves to a point, because of, well, the society. Let's not pretend that there's no basis for any claims of the radical left, but kids who grew up in bad neighborhoods sort of get this idea about themselves that black kids are less intelligent than white kids, and if you put him in a class full of white kids and have him do an IQ test, then he's going to score lower than if he's amongst his peers and he feels more comfortable. So these these statistics aren't completely true, but they are partially true. There is a sort of genetic, well, there is something genetic that affects IQ and leads to that black people in general have an average IQ that is slightly lower. Again, this is an average. Like I said, Neil deGrasse Tyson probably is smarter than most people who listen to this video. And even then, he's not that smart, so even if those differences between IQ aren't really that substantial, I think that building your whole worldview about who has value and who doesn't based on IQ is sort of pointless, because we're all kind of retarded. Even the smartest ones of us are pretty fucking retarded, so 5 points more, 5 points less, not really making much of a difference. But to get back to my point, if you actually do IQ tests to decide who gets the vote, and if Bob believes that black people will only vote for Democrats, he wants more minorities, he wants more Mexicans, more blacks, more immigrants to be in the country, to reduce the percentage of the white population, to reduce the white vote, which he believes will reduce the Republican vote. Well, this isn't going to work, because if it's actually an IQ test, then it'll bar a lot of minorities from voting, because they'll fail. If this is an IQ test for only the people who are smart enough to vote, then statistically there will be less African Americans who will pass this test. Sorry to anyone who's offended by this, but the studies are pretty clear on this. Statistically, African Americans have a slightly lower IQ levels than average black, and than average white people, and Asians have an even higher IQ. Ashkenazi Jews have the highest IQ, and the rest is sort of, well, it's mixed. It's pretty mixed. There's a whole chart. Well, you know what? In the end, they run faster than us, so I think we got the short end of the stick. I'd be dumber if I could run like half a mile without getting a heart attack. Would trade with it in a heartbeat. But anyways, so this plan is not going to work if it's an actual IQ test, but I don't think it's actually an IQ test, because I think that Bob's measure for IQ isn't actually IQ. It'll be a test for, do you agree with me? Because I think Bob's measurement for smart and not smart is having the same opinions as him. In this theoretical world where Bob devises a test to decide who gets the vote, and the test is supposedly supposed to be for intelligence, then it would not be a test for intelligence. It'll be a test for, do you agree with all my opinions, and if you don't get to vote. That'll be the test. And by the way, even if you sort of create this system, it's sort of naive to believe that this gerrymandering won't be done by the conservatives right back. I mean, just look at actual gerrymandering, where both the Democrats and the Republicans just sort of mess around with district lines to try and beat each other to get more votes, even if they don't actually have more voters. So the same thing is going to be done. The same thing is with voting identification laws, because Republicans also believe that minorities will vote for them less. So there's definitely at least some people within the Republican Party who don't want people with no IDs voting, because, well, that's more votes for them in comparison. Of course, a lot of this is, immigrants, illegal immigrants who should not be voting, and of course, on the other side of the aisle of this is the Democrats, who want there to be no identification laws for voting, because then they can get a bunch of illegal immigrants to vote, and the illegal immigrants will vote for them. So both sides are sort of trying to screw the system. But basically what I'm saying is that if you do devise this sort of test, and it's actually administered fairly, they will administer it unfairly, but with a fair amount of control by both sides, then both sides are going to try to fuck with the test to get their voters to pass it. So this isn't going to work either. Not that it would work anyways, but, well, how do I explain this? The point is that if you make this sort of test, then the only way for the test to go the way that Bob wants it to go is, first of all, for it not to be an actual intelligence test, and second of all, for the Democrats to sort of be in complete control of it, to not allow the Republicans to touch it in the first place, which, if you're at that point, just drop the pretenses, just get to the dictatorship. There's no point to continuing to pretend. Like, this is an obvious and not very clever way to give yourself legitimacy when you don't have any. Create a test that will make only people who would vote for you be able to vote, and not allow the other side to have any control over the test, and then pretend like, hey, our voters are just smarter. That's just the way that the cookie crumbles, buddy. That's just how it came out. Now, there's also a problem here because Bob believes that intelligence, which is, again, not actually intelligence, but let's say he's actually talking about intelligence, that intelligence and morality are linked. Now, I'm not sure which way he's looking at this. He either thinks that everyone he disagrees with is immoral and therefore unintelligent, or that everyone he agrees with is intelligent and therefore moral. It seems like there's not much difference, but, well, there's a slight difference. Never mind. Let's not get into that too much. The point is that there's actually no real connection between morality and intelligence. The worst thing is that if someone is extremely intelligent and immoral, that just makes them better at doing immoral things, and makes him better at convincing himself that what he's doing is okay. If someone's pretty dumb, you can sort of wear him down, show him what he's doing is wrong, and eventually he'll run out of excuses and he'll have to admit that, you know what, I'm kind of fucking up. I shouldn't be doing what I'm doing. Someone smart, he'll always sort of convince himself that, I shot all those homeless people, but they deserved it. I can't explain exactly why, but they deserved it. Let me just show you an equation to explain to you why me shooting homeless people was completely okay, officer. No. Put down the handcuffs. Let me just get my pencil. Anyways, so there's no real connection between morality and intelligence. So, of course, by morality he means agreeing with me. Either he actually thinks that this is morality and that there's a real connection, or again, like IQ, he doesn't actually mean IQ, he just means, if you agree with me, then you're moral. Everything I believe in is moral. Anyone who disagrees with me is immoral. Now, to the second part of his plan, because his plan is sort of intermixed. There are several steps, but they're combined with each other. But the two major parts are the idea of intelligence and morality and everything being linked, and that sort of leads you to a eugenics plan, and the eugenics plan sort of connects with the globalism plan to bring in more minorities into the country or make people lose their job. It's sort of that's the connecting link between the two plans here. But the second major part of Bob's worldview is the idea of globalism. Now let me explain to you the problem with globalism. It's bad. I mean, in a utopian world, in a utopian society, if we can all just hold hands and create a human chain with our dicks in each other's asses and all be friends forever, then globalism would be great. But let's be honest here. You give a central sort of body a control or influence over every country on the planet, that's gonna go very wrong very fast. You're creating a worldwide dictatorship. So if now we have dictatorships in certain countries, and you can maybe leave your country by some miraculous means, escape the shit that you're living in, and you can go somewhere else where you're free, that's over. That's not gonna happen. Worldwide dictatorship, you're fucked no matter where you go. And if one country is just going completely to shit, just everything there is awful, then maybe a different country will maybe step in. It doesn't happen often. America is the world police, and it doesn't really work very well either way. But there's some hope. Well, guess what? We're in a globalist nation. The entire planet is a dictatorship. You're fucked. No one's gonna save you, because the people who could save you, they're part of the dictatorship. By the way, this doesn't actually help progress, because a big part of why we progress as a society is because different nations have different ideas. So a field of research that will be banned for some ridiculous moral reason in one country will be completely okay in a different one. Just, there are stories all throughout history where one country simply could not advance as a nation, as a society, because they simply decide that one field of study is not worth looking into, or that something is immoral, or that something is bad, or for any number of reasons. So if you create a globalist society, then there will be entire fields of study that will be lost because someone just decides up top that, you know what, no one is allowed to stick his nose into this. This is just forbidden territory. Globalism does not help advancement. It helps advancement in some ways, but overall, if you measure the good with the bad, I think the bad wins out. Because the good is that there's more international cooperation, we can sort of advance faster, but ultimately there will be some fields where there will be no advancement ever until the end of time. And a big problem here is also that Bob believes that if this globalist, which in Bob's mind, Bob's vision of a globalist society will be a globalist dictatorship. Let's be real here. It'll be a far-left globalist dictatorship. But let's think about this for a second. Okay, so you create a globalist society. Do you really think anyone who disagrees with you will not try to infiltrate this society, infiltrate this sort of world government? Do you think that the conservatives won't join in and try to get some influence? So you get into this position where if the globalist society works out perfectly and his view gets imposed on everyone against their will, great, it's for the greater good. But he doesn't realize that there's a very good chance that if you actually create a globalist society, then the people who he disagrees with will be the ones calling the shots, and then he'll suddenly be like, okay, this is very bad, this is a worldwide dictatorship. See, my tyranny is okay, but other people's tyranny over me, that's crossing the line. You can't do that. That's fucked up. So that's the flaw with Bob's globalism idea in general. But to get into smaller details here, Bob's plan is that the United States will bring in immigrants, export manual labor, and basically, I mean, this is all to fuck over the people he doesn't like. And he tries to paint this as a good idea, like, more diversity and so on. But as I already explained in the video, basically all you're doing is bringing in poor people to do poor people jobs, taking poor people jobs to other countries where it's basically sweatshops, and robbing people of their jobs. The people who are already the poorest in this country, well, they get replaced with even poorer people who can do this job for even less money, and they're left with no job at all. But of course he doesn't care because he believes that the people who will be hurt by this policy are the people he doesn't like anyway, the people he wishes wouldn't vote. So this is basically all just a very unconvincing sort of ploy to screw people over, to try to basically get them to starve to death. Honestly, that's, I think, his I think he would go this far. If he could starve them to death, then he'll be very happy with that. But basically, this is also not going to work because this is as a model for an economy, it's not going to work. First of all, will not elevate the poor. This will just turn them into slaves. And I mean the poor from other countries. The poor from this country, well, there's a big problem here because, and I get this from a lecture by Jordan B. Peterson, yeah. Okay, well, there was a very interesting lecture that I saw him give on the internet. I, of course, didn't actually go to Canada to go watch him speak, but the point is, what he talks about is that some people, well, the job market is tilting more and more toward intelligence, which would suggest what Bob is saying, but hold on. Simple jobs are getting more complex. Complex jobs are being replaced with robots, being automated completely. So the threshold for how intelligent you have to be to actually find any work is getting higher and higher. Now Bob says that the racist, patriarchal system of America has allowed unintelligent people to prosper, in quotes, without deserving it. Now, what he describes as prospering is working shitty factory jobs and being broke. So of course this isn't actual prospering, this is being poor. These people are certainly not prospering in any way. I mean, changes to the economy have made working shitty jobs even shittier. So I guess he imagines that the minimum wages, the wages remaining flat for the last few decades, are the result of progress, and that white people are just angry about this. But it's not progress. It's just the economy going to shit. And the people who were successful in the past, who were at least functioning in the past, because you could at least buy a house with a normal job after a few years, are now just, basically wage slaves. So what he describes as prospering and what he describes as financial anxiety is just, it's the economy not really working out as it should. I don't really want to get into details, but as I was saying, as Peterson explains, you need a certain level of intelligence to do certain jobs, and about 15% of the population have an IQ of like 85 or less, and these people, there is virtually nothing you can teach them how to do. They need very simple, very repetitive jobs. He says that he's worked with people of that IQ level, and he says, listen, I have here a room full of people listening to me speak. You people are in the range of, 100 to 130 IQ, I'm guessing. What I can teach you in a few minutes, it will take, and you will do it perfectly, it'll take me days and hours and days to teach someone with an IQ of 85 to do this at an even just an acceptable level of proficiency, just the most basic level. So you got like 15% of the population who can't get jobs, because even being a cashier now is difficult, because you have to learn how to work a program, some sort of software. It gets increasingly more difficult. Now, the easiest jobs like driving are being replaced with robots. Well, that's what people are hoping to do soon. And this is pretty much the number one job for people with no education. Like, there are countless drivers in the United States. So, and this extends to even more complicated jobs, because just as I was listening to this lecture, I read an article that apparently they've devised a bot that is a lawyer. Like, I'm not saying he's gonna be, fighting on behalf of OJ, but this is a bot that has overturned several tens of thousands of parking violations and traffic violations. Okay, so we can all agree that being a lawyer is difficult. That being even a shitty lawyer, you have to spend years in school. This is a job that Bob would probably not be good at. So this difficult job that many people are not on a level that they can achieve it, that they can function at it, this is being replaced by a robot. So the new lowest standard for work is going to be much higher than, I'm guessing 50% of the population. Like, you are going to be left with massive amounts of unemployment. So this is a problem we're going to have to deal with. But what Bob says here in the tweet that I didn't actually show in the video, I didn't even save it, he basically just alludes to the idea that we're going to need a global minimum wage. Now, this is an idea that has been brought out in the past. The idea that even if you don't work, you should get some amount of money from the government, because there are just not going to be enough jobs for everyone. And this is probably true, but there's an unforeseen problem that most people don't expect, and this is also from the Peterson lecture. This causes a drug problem. Now, you might be asking, how does this cause a drug problem? What does this have to do with anything? But America has an ever-growing antidepressant problem, because when you have no work, you sit at home and you get depressed. And depression is closely linked to chronic pain. So people lose their jobs, they can't find a new job, they sit at home and they start imagining that they're in pain. And this is some vivid imagination, like they're in pain. This is psychosomatic, but this is serious. So of course they go to the doctor, they get antidepressants or pain pills, which is of course paid through government subsidies, and well, they get addicted. And this is an ever-growing problem. And I'd like to make a sort of detour here. You all probably read the works of George Orwell. And whenever we talk about George Orwell, we always say, he really predicted the future really well. I mean, he predicted pretty accurately what happened in the Soviet Union, and some of the technologies that didn't exist at the time now, according to some leaked information, actually exist in North Korea. Like in 1984, there was a segment where they say that everyone's house had a radio that you could turn down but not turn off, that just spewed propaganda all day long. Well, they're doing that in North Korea. You can't go anywhere in North Korea without hearing propaganda being blasted. Every shop has to have a radio that blasts propaganda all day long, and you can turn it down, but you can't turn it off. Impossible to turn it off. And if you somehow break your radio, well, guess what? You're going to a forced labor camp for the rest of your life. So he predicted this pretty accurately. He even predicted that they'll be watching us from inside our own living rooms, where, well, now smart TVs are apparently being spied on, being used as spy tools by the NSA. So who knows how long until we're actually being actively watched in our living room and being told what to do by a microphone on our TV. I mean, these are just, conspiracy theories, but, he predicted that, maybe he predicted this too. But the point I'm trying to make here is, when we talk about Orwell, we often compared him to Aldous Huxley. How do you pronounce his name? Well, you compare him to A Brave New World. You compare 1984 to A Brave New World. But when the comparison is made, people never really compare the prediction of the future. But I think at this point, we're kind of getting to a stage where Brave New World is starting to predict the future, because in A Brave New World, there's an interesting segment near the end of the book where one of the dictators of the world talks to one of the protagonists and explains that, everyone gets drugs. Everyone gets drugs so that they can sort of, when they feel bad, they take the drugs, and that's it. You don't have to, everyone just gets drugs from the government, so there's no disgruntled people. You do your wage slave job, you go to work, you go home, and if you feel uncomfortable about your economic position, about the fact that you're poor and you got nothing to do, well, take some drugs and, stay high until you have to go to work again tomorrow. And he says that, the guy in the book says that they have the technology to get rid of almost all work. They can get rid of about 2/3 of the jobs by automating them. Just get rid of it. And he says, at one point we decided to do an experiment. We automated part of the labor, and we gave a certain group 2 more hours of free time a day or a week. And those 2 hours were enough to get them to completely hype themselves up on drugs. Like, these people they had those 2 extra hours, they had nothing to do with them, so they just loaded themselves up on drugs so they can do anything with that time. And this is, of course, just, a book, a fiction, but it's getting to the point where it's kind of predicting what we have now, because if we get rid of all the work and everyone's just going to sit home and be depressed, then we're going to have a serious drug problem. So this idea of we'll just get rid of all the work, we'll get rid of all the manual labor, and that will, of course, screw over the people that Bob Chipman hates and make sure that they have to stay home and just sort of be unproductive. Well, first of all, it's going to create a huge, massive drug problem. This is a sort of an unforeseen circumstance for, communism generally has a lot of unforeseen circumstance. People go, from each according to his ability, to each according to his needs, and this never actually works out, because once you get into the small details, you realize there's no functioning way of making this work. You talk in the abstract, but when you get down to the micro, it just collapses. It goes from bad to worse very fast. So this is the problem with Bob's idea, that first of all, you're not going to create a perfect society by just letting people stay home, not work, letting the only people who are capable of working, giving them all the power and all the money, because the people who got no jobs are just they're gonna go crazy. We're gonna need to find a solution for this somehow, but it's not gonna be Bob's solution. And what Bob does not foresee in this is that he's gonna be right down there with them, because as much as he wouldn't like to believe it, he's not very smart. I mean, you know what? Again, like I said, let's assume that he has above average IQ, just theoretically, okay? Don't actually believe this. Maybe marginally above average, which is enough to make someone to think he's a fucking god. I mean, you find people who are slightly smarter than the average person, and they are just full of it. They think that they're hot shit because they got nothing else going for them. So they build. Well, never mind. Let's not talk about that right now. The point is, Bob will be fucked over with the rest of them because you know what? If he's definitely not smart enough to be a lawyer, because if he was a lawyer, if he was anything that requires, if he was capable of being anything that requires real effort, he would have done it. Being a film critic isn't really that impressive. It doesn't really require a lot of intellectual prowess here. He's not fucking Einstein. He will not be in the intellectual elite. Let's be truthful here. As much as he'd like to believe it, as delusional as he is to believe that in a world where intellect is the only scale for how important a person is, he'll be very down on one of the bottom rungs of this ladder. He's gonna be fucked if his sort of dictatorship comes into fruition, if his Orwellian idea of a perfect society ever comes to be. He'll be fucked. And he doesn't realize another problem, because if everyone loses their job, if any manual labor is gone, then that'll drive people to look for employment elsewhere. And you know what employment you can do without any education, without any skill? You know what job you can do with that? You can do Bob's job. You can be a film critic. He's gonna have millions of people in this theoretical world who got no job, who have nothing to do all day, and they will just flood this industry. And at that point, basically you're gonna be in a position where being a creator on the internet on any level is basically gonna be the new flipping burgers. It's gonna just industrialize completely, and Bob is going to be in a position where he works 12 hours a day to make minimum wage, because he has to compete with, I mean, you increase the supply of workers, well, you decrease the demand, you decrease the money you pay for them. And if there's 1 million people who have no job, then at least if you have 20 million people, 50 million people who have no jobs, have no education, no skill, and they need to find new unskilled labor, and all the unskilled labor is also completely replaced by robots, well, art is the next best thing. But not real art, because they're not artists. Art criticism. That's easy, that's not complicated. And bam, you got millions upon millions of new film critics, and the price you pay for their work drops. The demands for them, the demands to get paid, get higher, and you find yourself in a place where basically there's going to be a McJob, a sort of McDonald's-like corporation who just pays artists and critics to sit at their desk for 12 hours a day to pay them $5 an hour to produce content. And you know, you want to go on and get something to drink, well, guess what? You can't. It's going to be basically a content farm, but literally a farm, literally a sweatshop for content, for internet content. You're just going to have a little cubicle, and you want to go on break? Well, you're not getting paid for your lunch hour. Unlike what he's doing now, which is sitting around in his underwear making videos. He's gonna, in this future, he's gonna be so screwed. So let's see what I've gone out over here. Let me just look at my little list of talking points. Okay, so this is basically it. And that's basically all the major points of Bob's ideas that I want to sort of refute, of how his ideas would create a perfect world. But basically, before I sign off here, I was talking about Jordan Peterson a few minutes ago, and there was a very interesting lecture he was giving, and he was giving it, I was watching it just as I was writing the script for this video. And you know, I listened to it, and maybe it's because I was doing two things at the same time, and I sort of formed a connection, or maybe I'm right, but what he talks about really reminded me of Bob. So I'd just like to finish off this video with that clip. I'd like you to watch it and see if Bob comes to mind.
Rationality has one big problem. So it can easily become arrogant and believe in its own theories. So if you're smart, and there's going to be some of you people who are like that too, some of you, the primary trait that distinguished you from other people over the course of your whole life was that you were more intelligent than most. And you may have staked your identity on that and overvalue intelligence and rationality. And the problem with that is that you make a theory of the world and then you tend to assume that it's 100% correct. That's the tendency to fall in love with your own theories. And that's what a totalitarian does. The totalitarian says, here's the damn theory, and it's exactly right, and you're going to act it out exactly. And if you don't, well, we've got some special treats in mind for you.